Imagine you're walking down a bustling street in Beijing or Shanghai. Every few blocks, you spot this bright blue sign featuring a white deer. Inside, orders are just flashing on screens at blinding speed, and millions of people are getting their coffee fix. It was hyped up as one of the fastest corporate ascents in modern economic history. But, well, there was just one staggering problem. In this explainer, we're going to uncover exactly how one of the fastest growing tech companies in the world literally faked hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. We're talking about a total ghost story built on fake transactions and cooked books that absolutely shocked global markets. Because think about the sheer scale of that number for a second. $310 million. Almost every single cup of that monumental success, it never actually existed. It's wild, right? So how exactly does a company pull off a deception of this magnitude right under the noses of top-tier global investors? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back to the very beginning and look at the foundation of this massive house of cards. Section 1. The Coffee Revolution, Dethroning the Giant. To understand this heist, you really have to look at its masterminds. CEO Jenny Zijiaqian, Chairman Charles Jianyao Lo, and COO Jen Liu. Together, they decided they were going to conquer China's coffee market. But they were up against an absolute behemoth, Starbucks. Now, for decades, Western coffee culture in China meant spacious, cozy cafes and expensive lattes that basically acted as a status symbol. Luckin pitched the exact opposite. They built these tiny, grab-and-go spots with incredibly cheap, heavily subsidized prices and a 100% app-driven payment system. It was entirely frictionless. But here's the catch. That slick tech narrative completely blinded investors to the incredibly dangerous economics of losing money on literally every single cup just to flood the market. And that hyper-aggressive strategy led straight to a massive payday. In May 2019, Luckin Coffee went public on the Nasdaq, raising a whopping $561 million. I mean, they claimed to have rapidly opened 4,000 stores and were serving tens of millions of customers. They completely mesmerized Wall Street with this story of explosive top-line growth. Wall Street totally bought the hype. Analysts were raving, declaring that Luckin was proving traditional retail metrics just didn't apply to them. They believed Luckin was the future of consumer commerce, scaling data faster than any physical chain in history. They were treating a coffee company like the ultimate tech disruptor. And because of that incredibly intoxicating narrative, investors pushed the company's valuation to nearly $4 billion. But behind closed doors, a massive, systematic criminal enterprise was running day and night. Section 2. Anatomy of a Scam. The Mechanics of a Massive Illusion. You see, when management realized their real coffee sales were just bleeding cash, they made a catastrophic choice. And the crazy thing is how surprisingly low-tech this massive fraud actually was. It basically boiled down to 3 steps. First, employees and related parties bought massive blocks of fake coffee vouchers to artificially inflate demand. Second, they funneled all that cash through a super obscure web of third-party shell companies, quietly cycling it back into Luckin's accounts as retail sales. And third, well, to make sure the books actually balanced, they had to falsify their raw material costs and expenses to hide their accounting tracks. Because to make a phantom revenue scheme work, you can't just invent the sales, you actually have to invent the costs too. So they artificially inflated their expenses by over $190 million. They went as far as creating an entirely separate operations database. They even altered bank records just to make the fake sales look mathematically plausible to anyone who might be checking the books. And we really need to pause here because it's absolutely crucial to remember who gets hurt in these situations. This wasn't just some victimless crime against faceless Wall Street institutions. When corporate fraud happens at this scale, ordinary retail investors literally watch their life savings evaporate. Retirement funds take devastating hits. Not to mention, it permanently damaged international market trust, casting a huge, immediate shadow over every single international company trying to list on Western exchanges. Section 3. The Short Seller Investigation, Cracking the Case. Every perfect crime eventually leaves a trail, right? But interestingly enough, the first cracks in Luckin's armor didn't actually come from federal regulators. They came from an independent research firm looking really, really closely at the data. Enter Muddy Waters Research. They essentially acted like corporate detectives, and in January 2020, they published this explosive, anonymous 89-page report. Honestly, it read like a spy thriller. They flat out accused Luckin of systemic fraud and laid out the exact mechanics of the illusion for the entire financial world to see. The sheer magnitude of their surveillance operation was just staggering. We're talking over 1,500 full and part-time staff deployed just to conduct physical surveillance across hundreds of stores. They recorded over 11,260 hours of store traffic video. Plus, they collected thousands of physical customer receipts. With all this hard evidence, Muddy Waters mathematically proved that Luckin's claimed items per store metrics were simply physically impossible. Section 4. The catastrophic downfall. The house of cards collapses. At first, Luckin fiercely denied the short seller report, but external auditors had already started pulling at the loose threads, and things unraveled fast. Following that January report, Luckin had to drop an absolute bombshell on April 2nd, officially admitting to the $310 million fabrication. The moment market opened, they lost over 80% of their stock value in a single session. Just wiped out. By July, NASDAQ officially delisted them, cutting the once heralded tech darling completely loose. And by December, the SEC formally brought the hammer down with widespread fraud charges. The legal reckoning was incredibly swift. That SEC charge resulted in a staggering $180 million civil penalty. But it definitely didn't stop there. They also faced sweeping Chinese regulatory fines alongside a Chapter 15 bankruptcy filing in the United States just to restructure their crushing debt. Now, in a bizarre twist of corporate irony, the brand itself didn't actually die. Under entirely new management, they managed to restructure their internal controls, clean up the books, and ultimately save the physical stores. But those original executives who engineered the massive deception? Yeah, they were completely ousted, stripped of their positions, and paid an unmitigated professional and legal price, including severe criminal prosecution. Section 5. The enduring lessons. What we must learn from the ghost revenue. So why does this whole disaster matter, and what should we actually take away from it? Well, here are the core lessons of this explainer. First, if a business model sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is. Flashy metrics like user acquisition velocity can be so easily weaponized to blind you to the actual reality of the business. Second, independent oversight is your absolute best defense. Short sellers, external auditors, forensic investigators, they are crucial to keeping the market honest. And third, you cannot use tech buzzwords to outrun fundamental economic reality. Revenue built on paper is just a ghost. Eventually, reality always catches up. Trust takes decades to build, right? But as we've seen, it takes mere seconds to completely destroy. Luckin Coffee wanted to move fast and break the rules, and instead they shattered the trust of millions of people. Which leaves us with one vital, provocative question to consider before we go investing in the next big thing. In a market fueled by high-tech hype, when the next great disruptor promises impossible growth, will you blindly trust the numbers, or will you be ready to spot the illusion?